The year is 2004 and Usher is gearing up to drop his fourth studio album. He was 3 years removed from dropping his third studio album, 8701, which went on to peak at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling 210,000 copies in its first week. As of today, this album is now 4 times platinum, but with Confessions, Usher would end up going diamond, selling over 10 million copies and dominating 2004, giving us a timeless project that has an impact felt nearly 20 years later. But before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this. If you like the content, you should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also follow my Instagram too. That would be greatly appreciated. You guys can always reach out and just show me some love. It's all good. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Represent where you're from, especially if you're representing the ATL. Comment down below your favorite songs from Confessions and why. Most importantly, comment down below what it was like for you when this album first dropped, because those are my favorite comments to read. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Like I said in the intro, in 2004, Usher was gearing up to drop his fourth studio album after being 3 years removed from dropping his third studio album, 8701. However, there were some problems that plagued 8701 that went on to affect Confessions as well. For those who have been tapped into my channel would know my boy Niall from the Culture Crypt representing the UK. Make sure to give him a follow because he's got some excellent content, and me and him have been wanting to do this video for almost a year now.
Clout Cancun, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this Usher Confessions breakdown. Now, in the year 2000, a lot of things were going on in the music industry that was shaking things up. CD sales were in a shaky place, and the advent of the internet was causing illegal downloads to run rampant across the world. As a result, less people were going to stores and spending $20 on CDs, and instead they were going on their computers, hooking up to the internet and getting free songs off of Napster. In March of 2000, just around a year after Napster was launched, several tracks from Usher's intended album All About You were leaked online. Some of these tracks included TTP, You Are The One, and Pop Your Collar. And this was a problem which would eventually come to plague Confessions in the 4 years that followed. Now, with rampant bootlegging and an underperforming single in this corner with Pop Your Collar, Usher knew he had to do something. Now, despite Pop Your Collar being an incredible song, the track underperformed in the US. Now, where I was in the UK, my older brother tells me Pop Your Collar was always played on MTV Base in the UK, and that track got multiple rewinds and did pretty okay. But for the label boards and people like LA Reid, it wasn't good enough. So Usher went back to the studio and retooled All About You into 8701. One of the tracks actually left on the cutting room floor of All About You is a song called Just a Friend. Now, if this song sounds familiar to some people, you might be associating it with the Mario song Just a Friend 2002, which we all know and love today. But originally, Just a Friend was an Usher track that was meant for All About You. But I guess the track slipped through the cracks and ended up in Mario's hands, and the rest was history. If you're interested in the original Usher version of Just a Friend, you can check it out on YouTube right now. 8701 hit store shelves on the 9th of July 2001 and would later go on to be certified 4 times platinum. The album featured a who's who of guest stars, including Soulshock and Carlin, Jim Jam and Terry Lewis, Babyface, and the Neptunes on production, as well as a guest vocal appearance from Diddy on the track I Don't Know. Now, this album featured monstrous singles with the likes of You Got It Bad, You Remind Me, and of course You Don't Have to Call. And musically, there's an argument to be made that this is Usher's best album alongside Confessions. Now, thematically, what made this album shine is the story of how Usher details both heartbreak and love lust across this album, something which would later carry on over into Confessions. Now, of course, for 8701, You Remind Me was one of the album's most successful singles. For the video, in fact, Usher recruited Chili of TLC to be the love interest for that song. A lot of people theorized that Usher and Chili were dating, and of course, they weren't wrong. Usher and Chili went on to date throughout the years between 2001 and 2002, and at some point, of course, they broke up. But the reason why we bring this relationship up is because Usher and Chili's relationship was the lifeblood of what later became Confessions. Now, Usher and his PR team were smart here. They didn't feed into any of the tabloid drama or answer any press questions when it came to Chili. Usher simply let his music do the talking. The recording process for Confessions allegedly dates back to 2003, with Usher submitting over 40 songs to his label Arista for the album. Some of the record's notable omissions include Red Light, which would later find a home on the deluxe version of Confessions, as well as Sweet Lies, produced by Chad Hugo and Pharrell of the Neptunes. Now, before we had Future in the mainstream, Usher framed Confessions around his quote-unquote dirty little secret of infidelity and let this theme engulf the album's marketing campaign, and I guess in the end, it paid off.
Now, it's a common misconception that the album Confessions is largely about Chili and Usher's relationship, which isn't true. The truth is that the album was largely based on the personal experiences of Jermaine Dupri, who was heavily involved in the making of this album. Jermaine is credited as a producer and songwriter for the album. Jermaine takes inspiration for songwriting from his own personal life. In an interview with Complex, he would talk about this when he was asked about the backstory behind the song Confessions Part 2 on the album. With Part 2, I personally had just gone through that situation in my life where I had a baby with somebody and I had a girlfriend and I had to tell him. That was my personal story. It was like picking up a book of mine. Me and Usher were writing the song together and I'd throw words at him. He'd say, yeah, we gotta say that. At this point, he didn't have a child. He had no baby on the way, so for him, it was fun. We were creating a story that was almost like a movie. He didn't cheat or have a baby on the side. By the way, this girlfriend that Jermaine is referring to is Janet Jackson, for those who don't know, and the two would eventually break things off. But upon writing songs like Confessions Part 2, Jermaine never felt like that song was going to create the excitement that it did. It was simply written for suspicion and mystery so it could make the listener think about who was Usher talking about. Jermaine notes that Chili really made the power of this song come to life. He said that she started believing that this song was really about her. She was doing interviews where she believed that the songs on this album were written about her. This was like the last nail in the coffin for Jermaine because he felt like he did an amazing job making someone believe this and that he actually pulled this off. They were trying to get into the minds of people to make their relationship story interesting. This is something that Brian Michael Cox, who produced and was a songwriter on Confessions, agrees with because he believes Chili poured fuel on the fire by doing interviews and saying certain things. A lot of time has passed since 2004, but back then, at least in the media, Chili wasn't saying the greatest things about Usher. Chili has said that if they would have met each other later on in life and were able to work out their differences, things could have been a lot different for them. Back in 2004, Usher would do interviews and say that despite the breakup, him and Chili were still friends. Chili would do interviews of her own around this time, and according to People magazine, she said that Usher portrayed himself to be this honest and great guy, but he really wasn't. She would further say that she would never take him back and that she didn't want to ever see him again. So you do with that information what you will. According to Jermaine Dupri, he felt that Usher could only become a superstar by opening up in his music. Arista, who was Usher's label at this time, felt like fans only talked about his records, so Jermaine decided that he would find a way to create a whirlwind around Usher by stirring up drama. My whole thing was to create a ruckus. He had a girlfriend, Chili. I wanted to create what girls think happens when we go to the studio. Women think it's a party in there. They don't think that we working. I wanted everybody to start wondering, who's he talking about? What's going on? Where's this coming from? That was the goal. Jermaine Dupri would further say that the topic of interest of people not being interested in Usher the person was the main subject matter at that point. He said that the media wasn't completely sold on Usher and Usher's interest inside and outside of the music. How do they make Usher interesting was the topic of the conversation. This was Usher prior to getting married, getting divorced, and having kids. The goal was to tap into songs like You Make Me Wanna off of 8701. The reason why is because that song was more than a song and was more of a story. A lot of people thought that the stories on the album Confessions were about Usher, but Usher was simply just playing a character. People assume things because, as I said, I pull from my personal experiences to make my music. That's why I take this time to speak to you guys and let you know really what it is. Yo, did you get a girl pregnant? Nah, that was the creativity of music. I will tell you that I love Chili a lot and she obviously loved me. It just didn't work out. But cheating is not what caused the relationship to collapse collide and crash. That ain't what broke it up. Niall would touch on the fact that during the making of Confessions, Usher would have over 40 songs to pick from his stash. Kawan Prather, who was Usher's friend and also A&R'd for this album, said that it was just too much music. There were sit downs with people such as Jermaine Dupri, L.A. Reid, who was running Arista at the time, Mark Pitts and A&R back then, and Kawan Prather to decide how they wanted to narrow it down. They would decide by the songs that came up more consistently. Confessions was originally slated to release in November of 2003, but the album ended up getting pushed back to 2004. The reason why is because Arista believed that something was missing and Usher really needed a single to set up the album. Usher has talked about his feelings after going back to the studio to finish recording and said that it was the hardest part for him. He had to get remotivated again because he felt like he already finished the album. Confessions being pushed back turned out to do wonders for the album because Usher going back into the studio led to the creation of numerous tracks that appeared on the album, including its first single, which was Yeah, featuring Lil Jon and Ludacris. This song would go on to be monstrous, topping the Billboard Hot 100 charts for 12 weeks in total. Now the album had the single that Arista was looking for, and it exceeded expectations because Usher, even doing the song Yeah, was seen as a huge risk, which we'll get into in the second part of this video. Burn would be the next single, and that would top the Billboard Hot 100 charts for 8 weeks. Usher really dominated 2004 because if you were to combine the singles for the album that went number 1, including the special edition of the album, it would add to 28 weeks combined. Burn for 8, Yeah for 12, My Boo for 6, and Confessions Part 2 for 2 weeks. So it comes as no surprise that upon the release of Confessions in March of 2004, the album sold 1.1 million copies in its first week, topping the Billboard 200 charts. The plan for the album worked because the hype was at an all-time high. Now it was time to deliver on the music front outside of the singles leading up to it. The journey to this album for Usher was a lot. Material for this album was getting leaked, the whole breakup with Chili, having to redo the album, living up to the hype, etc. It was a lot, but Usher persevered and dropped a timeless project. One thing that I would really like to mention about this album that I found really interesting was that 50 Cent and Usher were supposed to collaborate on a song called Ride. This never came to fruition due to both of their schedules not syncing, most likely because both of them were in their prime at this time. The song Ride was produced by Rich Harrison, who ended up producing the song Take Your Hand, which ended up on Confessions. The beat for Ride ended up getting repurposed for the Jennifer Lopez song Get Right. Most of J-Lo's lyrics differ from Usher's except for parts of the bridge in that song. According to an MTV article from 2005, Usher would approach J-Lo's camp and Harrison for publishing credit on the song due to her using part of his song. At the time, reps for J-Lo and Harrison could not be reached for comment, and Usher never ended up getting credit for this song to my knowledge. Here's a snippet of the song if you're curious.
So much we gotta say, but so little time. I like this right here, man. But if tonight ain't long enough, only the behind. It's that joint right here, man. Baby, take my hand and say you're right.
Some people say that Usher's version is better, and that's really up to you to decide. No doubt in my mind that this song would have been another hit for Usher if it actually did make it to Confessions, because Get Right by J-Lo ended up peaking at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. It really would have been ridiculous if this song did make it to Confessions though. It would just add another hit into the hat of Usher. This will wrap up the first part of the video where I discussed the history leading up to the album, and in the second part of the video, I will break down the history behind each track. The album Confessions starts off with the intro, which does like an intro is supposed to, and sets up the album. After the intro, we immediately cut into the smash hit song Yeah. This song would be produced by Lil Jon, who also features on the song alongside Ludacris. Now there was a bit of drama behind the song behind the scenes. Usher would record the song Yeah, and it wouldn't be until afterward that it was brought to Lil Jon's attention that he had already given the beat for Yeah to Jive Records. Records. Usher would be on Arista Records as I mentioned earlier. Lil Jon was hired by Jive Records to make 15 beats for Mystical. Mystical only picked a couple of tracks. However, Lil Jon wasn't aware that Jive Records gave one of the tracks Mystical passed on to PD Pablo, who was on Jive Records at this point. Lil Jon realized that he had messed up when PD Pablo played him the song Freak a Leak. Lil Jon would notice that this was the same music that he had gave to Usher, and PD would tell Lil Jon that he had already recorded, mixed, mastered, and put Freak a Leak on vinyl already. Lil Jon knew that he screwed up, but with so much already invested in the song, Jive Records simply wouldn't throw this all away. What made the situation even worse is that L.A. Reid went ballistic when he found out about this mix-up. This prompted Lil Jon to go back into the studio and create another catchy replacement track, which went on to be the beat for Yeah. I guess I never really paid it any attention, but Freak a Leak and Yeah definitely do sound similar to one another, besides being produced by the same person and within the same time period. But take a moment in time to think about if the song Yeah never even existed, which was a real possibility. The song didn't exist when Usher initially turned in the album to Arista. L.A. Reid and Usher would sit down and try to decide what the first single of the album should be, because at this point they didn't have one. After this is when Usher linked up with Lil Jon to make not only one but two tracks. One of these tracks became Yeah, as we know, but from what I've seen, it seems like the other track didn't make the album and may still be in the vault. The song Burn was looked at as being the first single for the album, but they really needed a smash out the gate, so this also led to Usher going back and making more music. The choice between Yeah and Burn wasn't easy, however, because there was a lot of hesitation behind the scenes. Crunk music was the trend at the time, and Usher wanted to make a crunk record, but it's said by Kawan Prather that he wasn't sure if it would be selling out and he wanted to do for R&B. After doing further research on this song, I learned that Lil Jon leaked Yeah to DJs across the country. The song circulated in late 2003, just around when record companies go on break for Christmas. By the time these companies got back to business in January, the song already had tons of radio plays with nobody from the label having to work it. The people had now decided what the single to go with was. Sean Garrett is a notorious, well-respected songwriter or hitmaker if you ask him. He's penned many of your favorite hits, especially if you're a huge fan of the music in the 2000s. It comes as no surprise that he has songwriting credits on this song, and he's talked in interviews about how Usher thought that this song was going to ruin his career, but it obviously didn't. Heck, even Jermaine Dupri has talked about how he thought that Yeah could have damaged Usher's career because of its quote-unquote ratchetness. He knew that the record could be a hit, but he didn't want it to go first. The song Yeah then fades into the song Throwback, which is produced by Just Blaze. When working with Just Blaze, Usher would go through different phases of what he wanted. At first, he wanted a dance record, then he wanted a hip-hop record, and then he wanted a straight R&B record. Just Blaze originally made this beat for Dr. Dre's infamous unreleased album, The Detox. The Detox was supposed to be Dr. Dre's final album, and this is why on the sample of the song, it says, "You're gonna want me back." Once it became apparent that The Detox wasn't going to ever come out is when the record was given to Usher. It sat around for half a year before Just Blaze was called in to work with Usher in the studio. Just Blaze would also reveal that Jay-Z was supposed to be on the song Throwback, but he was on vacation at the time and wasn't going to make it back in time to meet the mastering deadline for Confessions. This was when Jadakiss was approached about being on the record, but he would say that he couldn't because he was finishing his album at the time. Jadakiss would soon regret his decision because he would appear on Hot 97, which is a radio station in New York, and they played the song Throwback. Jadakiss would soon realize that this was the record that he was supposed to be on, but turned it down. He didn't know how much of a big deal it was going to be, so he ran into the studio and sent in his verse. This is why Jadakiss appears on the remixed version of the song on the special edition of the album. Throwback would fade into the Confessions interlude, interlude, and what happens in this interlude is self-explanatory. Usher is confessing that he is doing dirt on his girl behind her back. This is what Jermaine Dupri had to say about this song. When we write a song, we try to make it a little more interesting through a story. You Make Me Wanna was a story of him leaving who he was with to be with someone else. It wasn't just a song, it was a story. I took that concept and applied it towards All Bad Confessions Part 1. It was first called All Bad. This is a song that defined the title of the album and the mind state of the rest of the record. I had flown to LA. On my way to the studio, I was writing. I was using the scenery of my ride in the lyrics. Every time I was in LA, I was in Miami with my girlfriend. Everything that was going on in my passing to get to the studio, that's what I was thinking about, and that's what I wrote down. I thought people would think that he was talking about Chili. It was written for suspicion and mystery. We finished it in LA. The song would go on to be played for LA Reid, and him along with the people at Arista loved the record. A little known fact about this record is that Stevie Wonder plays the harmonica on it. Usher felt like Confessions Part 1 needed a Part 2, which happens to be the next track. I already pretty much talked about the story of this track in the first part of the video due to how it ties in to the history leading up to the album. After Confessions Part 2, we come to the 6th track on the album, which would be Burn. What's funny about this song is that every time I hear it, I automatically think of when Tom sang this song on an episode of the Boondocks. It cracks me up every time. The song Burn happens to be a song that Jermaine Dupri did long before the Confessions album. The song was written in about 15 minutes and came from Jermaine talking about letting a feeling burn, which led to Brian Michael Cox realizing that this was a good song title. This song was a bit more of Brian Michael Cox's story because he was going through the struggles of becoming successful. He had a girlfriend at this time, but his outside life was absolutely crazy around this time. He was fighting not to get pulled into that life, but his relationship was deteriorating because of it. After the song Burn, then comes the song Caught Up. This song was produced by the songwriting and production duo Dre and Vital. Usher didn't like the original hook for the song, which would lead to the song being reworked. While in the process of it being reworked, the song could have gone to someone else if he didn't like it. That someone else was an artist by the name of Glenn Lewis. It was really close to going to him, but after the song got played for Usher a second time with girls in the studio, it ended up making it on the album. After Caught Up comes another interlude, which was the Superstar interlude. Initially, the interlude had a different beat underneath, and according to Dre of Dre and Vital, this was the first song LA Reid heard and made him decide to pair them with Usher. Superstar interlude would fade into the song Superstar. Some facts about the song is that Faith Evans sings the background vocals, but they forgot to credit her. For a while, no one knew that it was her due to this mistake, but she sings on the bridge for that song. The next song is Truth Hurts, and this song was produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Terry would be interviewed about this song and he would say, "Truth Hurts is one of the first songs we recorded. We recorded that before we went back in and recorded the other things. When everyone turned in their songs, they heard Truth Hurts and said, we have to send them back to you." Usher then came back and we had a conversation of the overall concept. It needed some color. We then created That's What It's Made For, Simple Things, Seduction. While none of them ended up being singles, they added color to the overall picture of what he was trying to get across in his confession. After Truth Hurts comes the song Simple Things, and I couldn't really find anything about this song fact-wise. Obviously, this song furthers the story of the album. The song Bad Girl would be next up, and this was another track with production credits from Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. According to Jimmy, this song initially came from another writing team. It was a song that Usher had and struggled with finishing it. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, along with the Avila brothers, worked really hard to get the song where it is today. They took this song from a guitar lick idea to a full-fledged song. The song That's What It's Made For would be next, and once again, there really isn't much history behind this track besides Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis trying to create a sexy mood to the album. This is the same thing for the next track, Can You Handle It? The song Do It To Me would follow, and this is another song Jermaine Dupri has production credits on. This was Jermaine's attempt to make a feel-good song for Usher. In interviews, Jermaine said that this was the beginning of what we went on to hear Usher do years later with songs like Climax that nearly released 8 years after Confessions. Jermaine describes Do It To Me as the beginning of Usher's falsetto. He would further say that the lyrics to this song were incredible, but the way that Usher sang the song was experimental. Brian Michael Cox would also reveal that the song was completely inspired by his appreciation for Prince. It wouldn't be the only song to be inspired by an icon, because Sean Garrett would say that the song Yeah was inspired by Michael Jackson. On the standard version of the album, the song Take Your Hand would be next, and the song Follow Me would conclude the album. I normally only talk about the standard versions of the album when I do these types of videos, but I know people obviously would want me to talk about the song My Boo, which would go on to be included on the special edition of the album. My Boo would end up being the 4th official single for the album. It would peak at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 6 weeks. This song ended up not making the standard cut of the album, as we know, but during the making of this song, there were a bunch of different women that were being considered to feature on it. At this point in time, Alicia Keys and Usher had previously worked together on the remix of her song If I Ain't Got You, which was released in the UK. Jermaine Dupri had a good relationship with Alicia Keys from day one. Clive Davis, who's the founder of J Records, which Alicia Keys was signed under at the time, thought that Alicia would be good for the song My Boo. Here's what Brian Michael Cox would say about the record. Jermaine came up with an idea and then he sing Usher the melody. He is one of the fastest writers I know. He can internalize an idea and 15 to 20 minutes later, it's a whole song. The label didn't like that record. We were confused. Jive took over the project and we went on to go meet with Peter Diaz, and he was like, we're going to put this song on the reissue. I was like, you have no idea what that's going to do with this album. The album is already huge, but it's going to be Mona Lisa. It's going to be crazy. The label made a mistake of not putting it out on the album, but it got out, and it was also the start of the reissue. What Brian Michael Cox meant by the record getting out is that My Boo, along with songs like Red Light, went on to be leaked before their official release. The label definitely messed up by not placing this song on the original version of the album, but made up for it by putting it on the reissue. Confessions is such a phenomenal album, and it's truly crazy to learn about how much better it could have been. Almost 20 years later, this album still stands the test of time and truly also was a moment in time. All in all, let me know what you guys thought of this video. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.